Oh, I'm live. Okay, hello everybody, welcome back to another video. Today is day 67 of the plan. So yeah, 67. I did not just mark out the 6. Um, on the thumbnail, I started taking like pictures of that or out what day it is, but kind of went cheap on that, and you just mark out 6. Not because I didn't have a lot of paper, just because I didn't feel like getting out another piece of paper. But anyways, today is day 67 of the plan, and so I'll be reading second, 1 Samuel chapters 29 through 32. So yeah, let's get started. Starting out in chapters 29, Philistines reject David. Get ready, I'm ready to read. The Philistines brought all their military units together at Ephek while Israel was camped at the spring in Jezreel. As the Philistine leaders were passing in review with their units of hundreds of thousands, David and his men were passing in review behind them with Achish. Then the Philistine commanders asked, "What are these Hebrews doing here?" Achish answered the Philistine commanders, "That is David, the servant of King Saul of Israel. He's been with me a considerable period of time. From the day he defected until today, I found no fault with him." The Philistine commanders, however, were enraged with Achish and told him, "Send that man back and let him return to the place you assigned him. He does not go down with us in the battle, only to become our adversary during battle. What better would he integrate himself with his master than he in the heads of our men? Isn't this David that they sing about during their dances? Saul has killed his thousands, but David killed his tens of thousands." So Achish summoned David and told him, "As the Lord lives, you are an honorable man. I think it is good to have you fighting in this unit with me, because I found no fault with you from the day you came to me until today. But the leaders don't think you're reliable. Now go back quietly, and you'll be doing anything the Philistine leaders think is wrong." "But what have I done?" David replied to Achish. "From the first day I entered your service until today, what have you found against your servant to keep me from going into the fight against the enemies of my lord the king?" Achish answered David, "I am convinced that you're reliable as an angel of God, but the Philistine commanders have said so. You must not go into battle with us. So get up early in the morning, and you and your master's servants who came with you. When you've all gotten up early, and go as soon as it's light." So David and his men got up early in the morning and returned to the land of the Philistines. The Philistines went out to Jezreel. Chapter 30. David's defeat on the Amalekites. David and his men arrived at Ziklag on the third day, and the Amalekites had raided the Negev and attacked and burned Silla. They also had kidnapped the women and everyone in it from the youngest to oldest. They killed no one, but had carried them off as they went on their way. When David and his men arrived at the town, they found it burned. Their wives, sons, and daughters had been kidnapped. David and the troops with them wildly until they had no strength left to leap. David's two wives, Ahinoam the Jezreelite and Abigail the widow of Nabal the Carmelite, had also been kidnapped. David was in an extremely difficult position because the troops talked about stoning him, for they were all very bit over the loss of their sons and daughters. But David found strength in the Lord his God. David said to the priest, Abiathar, son of Ammihuddin, "Bring me the ephod." So Abiathar brought it to him. And David asked the Lord, "Should I pursue these raiders while I overtake them?" The Lord replied, "Pursue them, for you will certainly overtake and rescue the people." So David and 600 men with him went, and they came to Wadi Bazor, where some stayed behind. David and 400 of the men continued the pursuit, while 200 stopped because they were too exhausted to cross the Wadi Bazor. David found an Egyptian in the open country and brought him to David. They gave him some bread to eat and water to drink. Then they gave him some pressed figs and 2 clusters of raisins. After he ate, he revived, for he hadn't eaten food or drunk water for 3 days and 3 nights. Then David said to him, "Who are you belong to? Where are you from?" I am an Egyptian, the slave of Amalekite men. Said, my master abandoned me when I got sick 3 days ago. They raided the south country of the Cherethites, the territory of Judah, and the south country of Caleb, and that we burned Ziklag. David then asked him, will you lead me to these raiders? He said, swear to me by God you won't kill me or turn me over to my master, and I will lead you to them. So he led them, and there were the Amalekites, spread over the entire area, eating, drinking, and celebrating because the great amount of plunder they had taken from the land of Philistines and the land of Judah. David slaughtered them from twilight until the evening of the next day. None of them escaped, except for 400 young men who got in camels and fled. David had recovered everything the Amalekites had taken. Thus rescued his 2 wives. Nothing of theirs was missing from the youngest to the oldest, including sons and daughters. And all the plunder the Amalekites had taken. David got everything back. He took all the flocks and herds which were driven ahead of their other livestock, and the people shouted, this is David's plunder. When David came into 200 men who had been too exhausted to go with him and had been left at the watchy border, they came out to meet him and meet the troops with him. When David approached the men, he greeted them. But all the corrupt and worthless men among those who had gone with David argued, because they didn't go with us. We will not give all the plunder we recovered to them, except for each man's wife and children. They may go. Take them and go. But David said, my brothers, you must not do this what the Lord's given us. He protected us and handed us to the raiders who came against us. Who can agree in your proposal? The share of the one who goes in battle is to be the same as the share of one who remains with the supplies. They will share equally. It's been so from that day forward. David established this policy as the law and ordinance for Israel, and still continues. When David came to Ziklag, he sent some of the plunder to his friends, the elders of Judah, saying, here is a gift for you from the plunder of the Lord's enemies. He sent the gifts to those Bethel, Ramah, and Negev, and to Tyre, to those in Rory and Sifmoth, and Eshtamoth, and those in Hukal, and the towns of Jerahmeelites, and the towns of Kenites, and those who in Hormah, and Barashan, and in Athach, to those in Hebron, and those in all the places where David and his men had roamed. Chapter 31, halfway through, the death of Saul and his sons. Philistines fought against Israel, and Israel's men fled from them and were killed on Mount Gilboa. The Philistines pursued Saul and his sons and killed his sons Jonathan, Abinadab, and Malchishua. When the battle intensified against Saul, the archers found him and severely wounded him. Then Saul said to his armor-bearer, draw your sword and run me through it or these uncircumcised men will come. Oh, no. I just realized I made a slight mistake. Today I'll be starting one chapter of 2 Samuel. So this stream's going to end a little bit sooner than I was thinking. So as soon as this chapter ends, I'm going to stop the stream. And I'm going to start a new one. That's just like the second part of the stream. And it's going to be me reading the first chapter of 2 Samuel. Forgot about that. These uncircumcised men will come to me and torture me. But the armor bearer would not do it because he was terrified. Then Saul took his sword and fell on it. When his armor bearer saw that Saul was dead, he also fell on his own sword and died with him. So on that day, Saul died together with his 3 sons, his armor bearer, and all his men. When the men of Israel on the other side of the valley and on the other side of the Jordan saw that Israel's men had fled, that Saul and his sons were dead, they abandoned the cities and fled. So the Philistines came and settled in them. The next day, when the Philistines came to strip this land, they found Saul and 3 of his sons dead on Mount Gilboa. They cut off Saul's head, stripped of his armor, and sent his messengers throughout the land of Philistines to spread the good news in the temples of their idols and among their people. Then they put his armor in the temple of the Ashtoreth and hung his body on the wall of Bethshan. When the residents of Jabesh Gilead heard that the Philistines had done to Saul, all their brave men set out, journeyed all that night, and retrieved the body of Saul and the bodies of his sons from the wall of Bethshan. When they arrived at Jabesh, they turned their bodies there. Afterward, they took their bones and buried them under the Tamaris tree in Jabesh and fasted 7 days. So that's all the reading for the first half. So it starts out chapter 29, talking about how originally Philistines reject David to let him work on their side, but then he goes in on the Philistine side for a little bit, and then he leads his people, his troops, to go rescue all the people that like took his and his like all the people around his stuff. They looted his items and all that, and so he went, got those back. Then he got his wife and his kids, or not his kids. He got his wives and all the other people's, like he saved all the people there. And then that was weird. It's showing like people are leaving and rejoining constantly. And then he kind of talks about how the Philistines go and they're fighting, and Saul realized they're gonna kill him, and he didn't want to die by their hands, so he tells the armor bearer to kill him, but this armor bearer wouldn't. So then he like kind of intentionally fell on his own sword and killed himself. So I guess he'd rather die by his terms than by their terms. It's still kind of weird idea to think about for me today's standards, but I mean that's just kind of what he just do, I guess. And so yeah, so I guess that's all for the first half or first part of today. I'm going to stop it there and I'm going to start a new one for the beginning of 2 Samuel, because eventually I'm probably going to organize them where, like, if you're going through YouTube on, like, a web browser or maybe on TV, you'll see, like, a section where it's just all the videos in Genesis and then all the videos in Exodus, Leviticus, Numbers, Deuteronomy, all that stuff like that. So, yeah, see you in a little bit.